Hi everyone, so welcome to the next class. So far what we have done is that we have looked at the task of language modeling and then looked at three families of large language models, right? The encoder only family where we saw BERT and its variants. Then we had the decoder only family where we had the GPT, GPT-2 and so on. And then the encoder-decoder family where we looked at BART and T5, right? So we have looked at the three families. Now what we are going to do is that look at the bigger picture, right? So there are so many large language models which have come out in the past 1 year or so, and we have looked at these three families. So how do you connect these various large language models to these families? And then given that so many of them are there, how do you sort of come up with a framework where you can study their similarities and differences, right? So that's the bigger picture and the road ahead. So as I said in the previous lecture, we dived deep into T5 and the choices behind it, and since that many large language models have come out, and what we are going to do is trying to group them into different families, and then try to understand even within a family how do they differ in the choices that are made in developing these large language models, right? So one way, as I said, is to group them into these three families: encoder, encoder-decoder and decoder-only. And the diagram that you start seeing at the bottom is going to grow soon, right? So the first sort of set of models which had come out were these encoder-only models, right, which were BERT and its variants. And for a short time, sort of they dominated the field. They were all like BERT, DistilBERT, LBERT, Roberta, all of these variants which were of the encoder-only model, typically trained using the masked language modeling objective. These were the dominant models 2017 to 2019-ish, I guess, yeah. That's what this diagram also says. And then came the decoder-only GPT-2 model, GPT-1 model, which was again around 2018, right? And after that came the encoder-decoder models also, right? So you had GPT-2, which was a decoder-only model, and then you had this T5. You can see the green branch now, right? So now we have these three main branches. One is the encoder-only models. The gray branch is this early age word representation models like word-to-vec, glove and so on, right, which we have moved on from now. But we still have these encoder-only, encoder-decoder and decoder-only models, right? And this sort of tree is going to grow. You can see already you see many names here, and the number of names and models is just going to keep increasing as I go ahead. Now what do you do after this, right? So we looked at T5 where several choices were studied, and then they came up with an architecture, how much data to use and so on. Now what do you do, right? So now if many more models have come after T5, what are they doing? Are they changing something in the model? Are they changing something in the data sets being used, or what is it that they are really changing, right? And what do they scale? Do they scale the model? Do they scale the data set? In what proportion and so on, right? And around this time, right, came 2020, came the scaling laws, right, which sort of led to a race of building larger and larger models, because what they showed is that as the model size increases and if you appropriately increase the data size also, then your performance will keep improving, and that was the hope given by the scaling laws, right? And after that, many other models came out. There was GPT-3 with 175 billion parameters. Then there were GPT-J, which was 6 billion parameters, open source, and you can see there are already many names listed here in the 2022 year itself, right, between 2021 to 2022, and you can see that the decoder-only branch is sort of growing faster than the encoder-only and the encoder-decoder. The encoder-only branch almost stopped after 2020, right? But this branch is the more popular branch now because GPT is sort of based on that, and many descendants of it, or post GPT-3, everyone sort of started pivoting towards the decoder-only models, but still there were encoder-decoder models also, right? Now at this point, I don't want you to get overwhelmed by all the names that you see here, right? The whole purpose is to show you that there are many models which have come out, and now how do we make sense of how does GPT-J differ from GPT-3 or GPT-Neo and so on, right? So that's the goal of this and the coming few lectures. So we'll get there, right? We'll try to make more sense of this picture, but for now I just want to show you that many models have come out, right? Then there was Jurassic 1, which had 178 billion, Gopher, which had 280 billion, Glam, which had 1.2 trillion parameters and so on. And some of these were proprietary models, some of these were open source models, right? And then, as I said, decoder-only models started dominating the field, with encoder-only models almost dying out, and a few encoder-decoder models surviving, right? And of course, this is till 2023, and post this also. So this, for example, I don't even see Llama or Llama 2 here, right? So it's still a bit older diagram in the context of how fast the field is growing, right? Then you had OPT from Meta, which had 175 billion parameters. And then other sort of improvements, right? So Instruct GPT had used something known as RLHF, which again for you right now is just a term. It's reinforcement learning from human feedback. And all of this was towards making these models more accessible to people, right? So now with Instruct GPT, what you could do is you could almost start chatting with the model, right? So that's what Chat GPT was based on, or at least rumored to be based on. Where you could now start typing instructions and it would follow those instructions, summarize this paragraph, or write a poem, write a story with following characters and following structure and all that. So those are the instructions that you are giving them, right? And so the number of open and closed, okay, now Llama 2 has come up, right? So this is post 2023. So yeah, this number is still growing, right? And Llama 3 is rumored to be planned for 2024. Gemma, which is the open source model from Google, came out a couple of weeks back, right? So it is really progressing, right? And now as a student of this field or as a practitioner of this field, how do you sort of make sense of what is happening in all these models, right? And you can see that there are several deep tech industries, this sort of bar chart that you see in the bottom corner, who have contributed. There are some academic institutes, other cap profit or not-for-profit institutes have also contributed to this race, right? And it will keep growing. Now, even if you were to just focus on the decoder-only branch, right, and I want to make sense of all the models that have come out, there would still be dozens of models, right? You can already see that, right? So what do they differ in? And if they're just following the same architecture, they're all decoder-only models, right? So then you know that the architecture is fixed. Then what do they differ in, right? Why do you need so many different models? What is it that they are changing, right? One is, of course, the data is set used to train the model. There are different data sets that have come out over a period of time, right? So far we had looked at some of these names should look familiar to you because I had referenced them when we are looking at the models that we have studied so far, which is BERT, BART, GPT, GPT-2, and T5, right? So I had referenced some of these data sets there. Now many more have come out over a period of time, right? There's just tons of data sets. Some of these data sets are related to code also. Some of these are information rich like Wikipedia. Some of these are conversation rich. I don't see any of those here right now, but maybe Reddit and other data sets which were used at some point were conversation rich, right? Because they are conversation threads and so on, right? So many data sets have come out. And then there are some changes which have been made to architecture also, right? There are some new types of embeddings which have come out, positional encodings. What we had seen earlier were absolute embeddings, now there are relative embeddings, no positional embeddings and so on, right? So many things have come out there. Again, this is all like a word chart, right? I'm just trying to expose you to as many terms as possible. I don't expect you to sort of really know any of these now. That's the whole purpose, that we will go over many of these over the coming lectures, right? And then even in attention methods, there have been improvements, whether to use full attention, sparse attention, what is known as multi-query attention, grouped query attention. These are all things that you don't know at this point, but we will learn them as we go along. Right? And sorry, not flashed, but flash attention, right? So sorry for the typo. So flash attention and paged attention and so on, right? So these are some of the changes which have sort of been proposed over a period of time, and newer models use variations of all these changes, right? So let's look at it a bit more systematically, right? Even in the case of normalization techniques, we have seen layer norm, we have seen RMS norm, deep norm, all of these different normalization techniques have come up. Now activation functions of course have changed over a period of time. Some of these we have already covered in the previous deep learning course, and then you have whether to use feed-forward network or mixture of experts. Then again in normalization there are different techniques, whether to use post-normalization, pre-normalization, sandwich normalization and so on, right? So a lot of things are there, right? Now we would like to come up with sort of a unifying diagram, right, which has all of these choices encoded into it, right? So let me go over this diagram. At the bottom, of course, you have the data sets. Then you have the positional encoding. There are several choices listed over there. As I said, we don't understand all these choices right now, but just know that there are many choices, right? Then within attention, there are many choices listed here. There is sparse, multi-query attention, group query attention, flash, and so on, right? Then within normalization, there are different choices. Within the MLP, in terms of activation functions, there are different choices, and then different choices again on the normalization, objective function, optimizer, all of these, right? So now if I look at this diagram, and of course the number of layers, right, which will define the number of parameters that you have, and perhaps the D model should also have been written here. We'll probably add it, which is the size of the embeddings used, right? So now if I look at this diagram now, and now I sort of this is like a generic template diagram. Now let me sort of instantiate this for GPT-1. So as you can see, now I can see for GPT-1 of all the dataset choices that I had, I used the book corpus, or they used the book corpus. They use absolute positional embeddings. This is absolute positional embeddings, you already know. These are the default positional embeddings which we covered when we sort of did the transformer architecture. They use the multi-head attention, the vanilla multi-head attention, which we had seen in the context of the basic transformer layer. Then layer normalization, again this was a part of the basic transformer architecture that we had covered. GALU activation, this is something that we have covered in the previous deep learning course. And layer normalization, and the objective function we had looked at was causal language modeling, and optimizer was Adam with weight decay, right? So this is what the GPT-1 diagram looks like, right? So now it becomes easy for me to like sort of have this one diagram and then sort of instantiate this diagram for all the different models which are out there, so that I can quickly understand what is the specific thing that that model did, right? So now if I look at GPT-3, then some things have changed. Let me just see. Yeah, you can see that some things has changed in the architecture itself. So you have much more data now. You have book corpus, common crawl, web text, Wikipedia. So that has changed. The number of layers is 96 now. Still using positional embedding, right? But they have this normalization, which is pre-normalization, right? So that was what has changed, right? That's why you saw this swap in the diagram of the normalization layer. So now you're using pre-normalization. Then attention. Now what is pre-normalization? That's something that we'll see later on, right? But I'm just saying that that is what has changed here. Then the attention that they use was sparse attention, right? And then again GALU activation, and the objective and the optimizer did not change with respect to GPT-1, and the number of layers was 96, which among other things contributed to the 175 billion parameter size of the model, right? Okay. Now if you look at Palm, then it looks very similar. The number of layers was 118. The corpus, you can see that some more data sets have been added here, right? So you have MC4, which is multilingual, then you have CC News, you have Star Coder, Real News. Some of these data sets were missing in the previous slide, but now they have been activated, right? And they used a different type of positional embedding, which was rope, then multi-head attention, Swiglu was the activation function, and they use ADA factor as the optimizer, and CLM as the loss function, right? So now if I know these components, right, if I know what all these 5 choices here mean, right, if I know what all these 3 choices here mean, or all the 6 choices here mean, or all the choices of the optimizers, objective function, and all the data sets, if I know all of these, right, then you give me any model and sort of I can make a mental picture, okay, this is what that model did, and sort of I can compare across different models, right? Because I know that at the end they are following either, I mean now predominantly the decoder-only architecture, or maybe the encoder-decoder architecture. So I know that. Now within that what is changing, and now I have this space mapped out, right? So I need to know all the different types of positional embeddings, all the different types of attentions, all the different types of normalizations, and if we know that, then any model is sort of easy for us to understand it. So that's what the road ahead looks like. We want to look at all these components where the models differ from each other and understand all these choices that we can make, right? So that's what. So first we look at all the data sources. So what are all these data sources that are listed here? What are the data pipelines that are used, right? Because when you have very, very large scale data sets, you need to have certain pipelines to sort of clean up the data, remove toxicity, do deduplication. There are several known and sort of well-researched stages that this pipeline should have. So we should sort of learn about them, right? And there are different data sets used for instruction fine-tuning and other things. So that also we should get to know, right? So get a hang of all the data sets. Maybe say Llama 2 used certain data sources and certain instruction fine-tuning data sets, but maybe say Falcon used something else or MPT used something else and so on, right? And that's where they might differ from each other. So that is one sort of axis of difference that we are going to look at. Then, as I said, filtering rules and all of this, right? So then the second axis of difference that we are going to look at is all the different positional embedding set models have been using over the past 1-2 years. Then the third axis is about the different attention mechanisms that are popular, right? The fourth is about the different normalization techniques. So this is all, right? So this, all of these differences is what we are going to look at, right? So one module on datasets, one module on positional embeddings, one module on attentions, and one module on the different normalization techniques, right? So if you understand all of these, then we can sort of draw a mental picture of all these tons of LLMs which have been coming out, right? So that's what the road ahead looks like. So I'll stop here, and then I'll start the module on datasets, right? So that's the first, as I said, first axis along which we are going to try to see what are the differences between different data sources which are available for training large language models.